So you may not be surprised to know that I have a very, very low pain threshold. I don't like any kind of pain. I've never ever pulled out a hair in my life. I had a hair growing on my forehead once. I refused to pull it. I used to nick it with a razor. Never going to happen. So you can imagine what it was like when I started turning around 7 years old and the milk teeth started to wobble. There was absolutely no way I was going to pull one out because of the prospect of pain. So I used to flick it with my tongue until it fell out. But Mum, she'd already had 2 boys already. She enjoyed picking them out. So she'd use little tricks. She's over there. Come here, I just want to see your tooth. I want to see how it's getting on. I was like, no, I know. She'd come looking in and trying to pull it out. So no, we're not having that. No one's going to pull my tooth out. So I just flick it until it fell out naturally. But then someone came along which kind of changed my mind about taking my tooth out. The tooth fairy. See, the tooth fairy, does he still do his thing? Does he still do his thing for the, yeah? Okay. So the tooth fairy would exchange your teeth for money. So I put my tooth under the pillow and magically money would appear in the morning. Now that was worth a bit of pain. You know, financial reward for just a little bit of pain, I'll take that. Now, I have a bone to pick with the tooth fairy. It's been nearly 30 years since my last milk tooth came out. And the most I ever got for my tooth was 75p. Now we're thinking this is about 1987. That's not bad, right? 75p, you know, you can still buy a couple of donuts for that today. Okay? So it's not bad. But my beef is that when my brother's teeth started falling out, he got £1. Now, granted he was, you know, a bit younger than me, so time had moved on. But when I questioned my mum, Mum, why is the tooth fairy only giving me 75p and he gets £1? And she said, oh, it's inflation. However, I did a bit of research. I googled the Office of National Statistics. I looked at the inflation rate between 1987 and 1990, and here's what it has to say. The myth is that in 1987, 75p was worth £1. The truth is that 75p in 1987 was worth 93p. So the tooth fairy owes me 7 pence. Now, when you adjust for inflation over the last 28 years, that means the tooth fairy owes me 19p. Now, you might be thinking, Father James, that's a really petty amount to be squabbling over. And it is. Of course it's ridiculous to squabble over 7p. But it does illustrate that money can get on the mind, can't it? You think, you know, probably every single day, particularly as grown-ups, you're worrying about the bills, the mortgage, the shopping for the kids, all those kind of things, the car payments, whatever it may be, money is on the minds. We have to manage our money in order to achieve those things that are truly valuable to us, that have true meaning for us. And so, today, we're going to have a discussion about money and giving in the church. That's right. Today and for the next 2 weeks, we'll have our first giving series of homilies. Now, that's not something we're used to in the Catholic Church, the priest standing up and preaching and saying, I want more money to be given to the church. But in fact, when we think about it, money is part of every aspect of our lives. It's even part of the aspect of our relationship with God. And we might be thinking, perhaps it's not appropriate for the priest to talk about money. But again, I did a statistical analysis of Scripture. How many parables did Jesus preach in the 4 Gospels, we think? I'll give you a clue. 38. That wasn't a clue, that was an answer. Okay. And out of those, 16 of those parables were on the management of money and possessions. That's 42%. So nearly half of what Jesus preached about in his parables was how you manage money and possessions. In the Bible, there are just over 500 verses on prayer. Now that's understandable, it's the Bible, right? Okay, of course it's going to be talk about prayer. There are just under 500 verses on faith, which makes a lot of sense because it's the Bible. How many verses do you think are dedicated to the management of money and possessions in the Bible. 2,000. Just over 2,000. So it's very important to God. And it makes a lot of sense when you think that our faith isn't just a spiritual reality, something which kind of floats around us, or about something, our invisible soul, but our faith most of all, because God became a man and took flesh, is about the living together and the redemption of the body and the soul. And when it comes to matters of the body, the church on earth, we have to talk about how we manage our material possessions to God's glory. It becomes an absolute necessity. So that's why we talk about money and possessions, because money and possessions help us to fulfill our ultimate purpose, whatever that may be. Now, that could be our family, but in the context of faith, it's to fulfill our mission. There's a quote that goes around: money is the root of all evil, and it can be, but actually it's a misquote. The truth is, in 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 10, is that the love of money, which is the root of all evil. You see, money, our possessions, are meant to be the means towards the fulfillment of our purpose. And often, in today's age, it gets turned the other way around. We can fall in love with the things we have and forget the reasons that we exist and what our possessions and our money serves. Money is meant to serve our ultimate purpose. Even Jesus says it many times. He says, use money, tainted as it is, to win you friends, and thus make sure that when it fails, they will welcome you into eternal dwellings. Money as a tool to achieve our ultimate purpose. And what is our purpose in this parish? What is our purpose in this church? What is the purpose of being a Christian? It's right there in the front of your newsletter. To grow a family of disciples united by Jesus' mission to make God's love known. That's our purpose. And therefore, our money, our possessions, and how we think of them in relation to the church are calling for them to serve that purpose. And when you think about it, how did Jesus call his first disciples, Peter and Andrew, in Matthew chapter 4? He made them an offer. It was an offer to invest. And why do we invest? Because we see a greater return. He approaches them and says, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men," or out to fish for people. And at once they left their nets and followed him. Now, one can presume that obviously they were in the fishing business. Perhaps they had their own fishing business. It fed their bellies, but also gave them a tiny profit to buy things and look after their families. That's what businesses are for. That's why we invest. We follow our investments to accumulate more, to achieve the things we want to achieve. And they just drop their nets like that, because Jesus is making them an offer. He says, give up that line of work and receive an upgrade. Now I'm going to send you out to fish for people. You're not just going to win some fish in your net, you're going to win disciples for the kingdom of God. And they drop their nets. So that means, number one, giving, investing, is a key aspect of what it means to be a disciple. Jesus says it. We follow our investments, don't we? If you give me £10 and I say to you, I'm going to take this £10 and by careful stocking and trading on the market, I'm going to bring you back 100. I'm going to get a few text messages. How's my £10 going? Yeah? You're going to follow the money, right? We follow our investments to see how they're doing. And that's what Jesus says. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If we want to know where our heart is, let's look at where our treasure is invested. I looked at my bank statement last week, and there are lots of contactless payments on there. Lots of contactless payments to Starbucks. We've renamed it St. Arbucks now. You know, because I like a coffee. When I'm travelling, I pick up a coffee, and then I'll have another coffee, and maybe I'll have another coffee. And you don't think about it, £2, £2, £2. And then it accumulates, and then it's quite a lot of money. So if I looked at that page in my bank statement, I'm like, wow, there is another altar that I worship at, St. Arbuck's. I need to wash myself. A key aspect of discipleship is investing our treasure in the things that matter, the one we worship. We invest our lives in Jesus. But giving is also Jesus' plan for us. Think about how he invests in us, what he gives to us. When Peter and Andrew followed Jesus, they invested their business in him, and he invested in them by giving his life on the cross. God is always that much more generous. God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son. That's what he does. And he calls upon us to give from what is ours. But not only to give what's left over, but to give of our first fruits, hence the title of this homily. If you think about it, God had his only Son, and in order to save us, he gave his firstborn, his first fruit for our salvation. He didn't say, well, once I've got around to doing everything else, then I might have a go with humanity. Oh no, he invested his whole self in order to save us. He gave his first fruits, and we see this pattern repeated throughout the Bible. God asks of his people of Israel, he puts it in law, to give of your first fruits, to give a tithe, 1/10 of your offering, in order so that you may receive a blessing. You see, God isn't asking us to just give our money away willy-nilly. He's asking us to invest in a blessing, to partake of his mission. So that means giving is also a barometer of our thankfulness to God. It says it in Psalm 116, verse 7. I will offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving to you and call upon your name, O Lord. When we offer a sacrifice of our income, we're giving thanks to God. That's what a sacrifice is. We take what is ours and present it to God so it may be his. And God gives us abundant blessing. So when we give away, we invest. When we give of our first fruits, we do so in order to participate in the blessing of God. That's how any relationship works. You think about it as a parent, right? You know, you make a sacrifice. First of all, when you're single, you sacrifice a degree of your independence to be joined to someone else. Now your life isn't your own. It belongs to someone else. You've made a sacrifice. Then you decide to have children. That's going to be a lot of sacrifice of time, effort, and resources. You do that together. And then as they grow older, you have to bring them up. You sacrifice everything. And you do it all for a greater good. The good that they may become strong, responsible, and caring adults. What normally happens in those relationships, if we invest ourselves completely, the love between those family members, between husband and wife, grows. When we invest, God blesses. And it's what he does with Abel, the very first sacrifice. Cain's sacrifice didn't go so well. Why? Because he gave of the last of his fruits. Abel gave of the first of his fruits. He gave everything. But giving also shows us that God can be trusted. Because whenever I sacrifice a portion of my wealth, and I'm not talking about a specific amount, I'm talking about a portion which is a sacrifice, it's an act of faith. It's an act of trust. It goes beyond what we say when we celebrate in church, when we celebrate our belief in God. We say to God, God, my Lord, I believe you and your promises. I believe in your abundant blessings, so I invest myself in you. Now, if we want a story of investment, the first reading today contains it all. See, in today's first reading, Acts chapter 9, Saul, who has become Paul, had been taken to Jerusalem. And he's a new convert to Christianity, very fresh, just received the oils in his head and the baptism water, and he started to preach Christ straight away. Imagine, though, what it was like for the people of Jerusalem. They were like, hey, wasn't this the guy who had Stephen killed? Just, he's the Pharisee. So they're a bit taken aback, they're a bit wary. And Barnabas has to say, no, he's on our side, don't worry. And he nearly gets them killed because now their enemies are also Paul's enemies and they try to kill him. How did Paul get to that situation? Well, we have to go back a few chapters to the first mini crisis in the church. Wasn't that bad? And you know what the first mini crisis in the church was? After selecting the 12th apostle, it was financial. In Acts chapter 4, had a bit of a problem. The church is growing. Good news. But if the church is growing, we need more resources. A growing church always needs to be resourced from the materials of the world. So what did they do? It says it right here. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed any of their possessions for themselves, but they shared everything they had. Put their resources and invest them in the mission of the church. Straight away, the slide failed. So, I'm going to have to go from here. So, what happened? In the slide after that, the verse after that, the apostles could preach with great power and win more disciples for Jesus. So from that investment, the church grew. But then another mini crisis hit. They were too successful. The church was growing almost out of control. And by Acts chapter 6, you've got the widows of the Gentile Christians and the widows of the Jewish Christians starting to fight. The mothers of orphans and all those in need, they're like, we're not getting the help we need. And Peter and the apostles have a decision to make. So we can't give up the mission of preaching. We can't give up the purpose of making disciples, but we've got to help these people. And so they appointed their first staff members. They invested their resources in Stephen and the other deacons. Stephen was the first. And within a chapter, because he's so passionate about his mission, he's landed himself in a bit of trouble. He's in the Sanhedrin. How did he find himself there? Surrounded by enemies who don't like the message. And he has a choice to stay quiet and walk away, or to preach the good news, the death and resurrection of Jesus. And he chooses the latter. They're quite angry with him, and they stone him to death. Who sanctioned that stoning? Who was there witnessing it, approving of the killing? Saul. Now Saul was watching this happen, didn't get his hands dirty. And he heard Stephen say, verse 59 of chapter 7, as he was dying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Now that is some offering. That is first fruits. Stephen giving his entire life for the message, and not yet knowing the outcome of Paul's life. And then the last thing he said, and this must have really cut Saul to the heart. I'm convinced this is what converted him. This is what allowed the Spirit into his life. Stephen said, Lord, do not count this sin against them. He was asking for Saul's forgiveness before God as he died. Now imagine how that would feel. So Saul gets on his horse, he rides to Damascus, he's trying to block it out of his head, and Jesus takes his chance, knocks him off the horse. And Saul says, funny question, Lord, who are you? Must have been so confused. Who is this God? Jesus says, I'm Jesus and you are persecuting me. From that moment, Saul became Paul, the greatest evangelist and sharer of the good news that the world has ever known. His mission converted the whole Christian West. And where do we live? In the Christian West. We are here because of an investment in Stephen, which turned into an investment in Paul, which started in an investment in Acts chapter 4. When disciples decided to pool their resources, to give of their money and possessions for the ministry of the church. And it leads us here today. The Lord is asking us, inviting us, and by scriptural command, telling us that we need to seriously consider what we give and where we invest our treasure. If we invest it in Him, if we invest it in His mission, invest it in this disciple-making church, we may be assured of the blessings of new followers of Jesus and the blessing of God on our lives. Amen.